Well, good evening, everybody. It's Chris here from the Whistle Stop Cafe in Mirror, Alberta. Sorry I'm late. Mitch had something come up and he had to bail tonight, but he's going to be back on another night. Keith Wilson is joining us to talk about some of the things that occurred today. But before I bring Keith on, I want to read you something from this book, Clifford Sifton, Volume 2, The Lonely Eminence, 1901 to 1929. It's kind of Clifford Sifton's memoirs and a compilation of his works. So this is on page 95 of this book, and I'm reading this to you because I want you to know that it's real, it's legit. He literally said this, Clifford Sifton, the Minister of the Interior, 1904, in Winnipeg. Listen to this. We all desire, every patriotic Canadian desires, he told the Winnipeg audience in 1904, that the great trade of the prairies shall go to enrich our own people in the East, to build up the factories and the workshops of Eastern Canada, and to contribute in every legitimate way to its prosperity. Page 95, Clifford Sifton, Volume 2, The Lonely Eminence. You can find this on Amazon used. The new ones are like $200-$300. I got mine for $20. Anyway, I wanted to make sure that you heard that quote and that you know it's real, so that when Keith and I start talking about the events that unfolded today, you can have a better understanding of why this path is being pursued here in Alberta. In the interest of time, I'm going to quit rambling on, and I would like to welcome our guest, Mr. Keith Wilson. Thank you very much, Keith, for joining on such short notice.
You're welcome. Great to see you, Chris.
Yeah, likewise. I'm sure you've been watching the news with bated breath, and you saw the same things we saw today. You want to jump right in and let folks know what's happening in Alberta politics and law?
Sure. Well, the good news is that late this morning, the Bill 14 in its amended form received royal assent. So it's now law. And that allowed Mitch Sylvestre and legal counsel Eva Chipiuk to attend at the Elections Alberta office today. They were there. They kind of took the chance to be there just in case it did get royal assent, so that someone else could not get there first and file some kind of spoiler application. And so they got the application filed. It's officially in, and this is the application for there to be a petition where we have to have 177,000 Albertans sign the petition, not just any piece of paper, not fake ones. It has to be an official form approved and issued by Elections Alberta. And we're going to have 120 days to get 177,000 signatures, which will then in turn require the Alberta government under the leadership of Premier Smith to hold a referendum on independence later in, I anticipate, the fall of 2026. So it's go time.
It is absolutely go time. And I want to read the last paragraph of this post from the Alberta Prosperity Project today. It says, Albertans, we need you on the front lines. Join as a door canvasser to collect signatures, spark conversations, and rally your community for sovereignty. Every knock counts. Sign up to volunteer today. albertaprosperityproject.com/volunteer-7. So there you go, folks. It's happening. Our government has been removing roadblocks to allow the people to ask questions, which is kind of the way democracy is supposed to work. However, Keith, I've seen on Facebook some of our friends, like, Nate over at The Breakdown and my friend Nahid, for some reason, they seem very confused, and they think that Bill 14 was some sort of authoritarian, power grab. And I don't understand why they think that. Like, if you're allowing the people to ask questions, how is that wrong or bad?
Well, I think one of the things that those on the left have learned, particularly since COVID, is that if they say something and they say it over again, it doesn't matter whether it's true. It doesn't matter whether it has a basis in fact or law. Legacy media will repeat it and it'll take on a truism. So let's deal with some basic facts. In my graduate degree in political science, And then in my law degree, I was taught in both of those learning experiences about the concept that we have in a modern parliamentary democracy in the Westminster model of parliamentary supremacy. And it means supremacy of the legislature. So what that means is that any sitting legislature, whether it's the House of Commons or whether it's a provincial legislature, can make laws, can amend laws, and can repeal laws, and can even do things retroactively. These are well-established principles. So under our system of government, we have the people we elect democratically to be the lawmakers, and then we have other people who have other functions, such as the courts, to interpret and apply the law. So what happened with Bill 14 is that it became obvious to all of us that something was wrong with the citizen petition process, where we were faced with facts where Thomas Lukasik files his question about staying or leaving in Canada, and it goes smoothly, right? Everything just goes smooth as it could be. And then the Alberta Prosperity files a formal question to trigger a referendum on independence. And what happens? The chief electoral officer refers it to the courts. And then into this existential abstract analysis of hypotheticals. So what happened was the Alberta government obviously saw this happening and went, wait a minute, this was never our legislative intention. It was never our legislative intention for citizens.
It's not what we asked for.
Yeah, it was not what they wanted the policy to be. They wanted it to be democratic, grassroots. If citizens wanted to bring forward a petition on an issue, they should be able to do so, and they shouldn't be subject to whimsical interference by bureaucrats or courts. And when they saw that this was happening, you may or may not recall that in the summer, in late August, when the original application was filed, the first thing that happened was the chief electoral officer said he was referring it to the court, and the Minister of Justice issued a public letter to the chief electoral officer saying, what are you doing? That was never our intention. And the Premier came out and made equally clear comments. So, hey, can you hear this background noise? My dog is really trying to get on camera. Are you just hearing me?
No, I can't hear it. No,
okay.
You might hear mine soon, though.
Hang on. So you talk for a minute. I'm going to get this hyperactive dog away from me because he's distracting me. And then I will be right back. Just give me 1 second here. And then.
Okay, I think Keith is muted and he's going to deal with his...
Just throw me backstage for a second.
Okay. Keith's going to go deal with his dog. I want to point something out. The Alberta government just gave everybody what they want. Everyone. The Alberta Prosperity Project has been saying for quite a while, hey, this Citizen Initiative Act the bar is way too high. It looks like it was never meant to be successful. And we want to be able to have a referendum. We want the people to be able to trigger a referendum by a petition, right? So the Alberta government, they've been removing roadblocks so that the people can ask questions and actually get it done. So Thomas Lukasik, he goes and he does a petition and the question is, he wants a referendum on the question of Alberta staying in Canada or leaving. And even his question may have been difficult. So I think what the government did is they said, seeing how we have both parties seem to want to put a question to the people, we're going to remove the legislative roadblock. So I think we actually have, we've got to give Tom some credit for helping show the government that the people of Alberta want to ask the question.
Thank you. Sorry for that interruption. I think my dog's trying to get famous, and he is really cute. But so let me just pause for a minute. I had one of the things that puzzled me early in my legal career, particularly because I'd worked in a fairly senior office in government for a number of years before I became a lawyer, was why people spend a lot of money on lawyers going to court arguing over the interpretation of a statute or a regulation. And why I was puzzled by that was because I'm like, well, the people who made the statute and the regulation are still alive,
Yeah.
right? And they're easy to find. They are always in the capital city, and they don't disguise themselves. They have these really fancy buildings with a big dome usually and statues. Like, they're really easy to find. You can't miss it. So why not go talk to them and say, hey, I think the intention of your legislation is messed up. I think you need to fix it, right? So I would actually do that on my cases. I would tell my client, I think there's a goof up here. I don't think this was the policy intention, or the world or technology had evolved. Go talk to your elected representatives, talk to the minister responsible and say, hey, can you fix this? And then take some time, and the government look at it, go, yeah, that is not what we wanted. So we're going to amend the law, right? Like, that's why legislatures, more often than not, in each legislative session, they don't make brand new laws. They're amending existing laws because they realize they have problems and they're not being implemented the way they thought they wanted to be, or the needs of the industry or the community or the society or the institution have changed. So this idea of the opposition parties of like hair on fire and, oh my God, they've amended the act. Yes.
Yeah.
To clarify the legislative intention. It was always the intention of this citizen. What's the title of it? Citizen Initiatives Act, right? It's all about citizens initiating legal process change at the grassroots democratic level. So I think, I know, and it's my view that not only is it an option available to a sitting government to amend legislation when they can see their legislative intention is not being implemented, I think they have a duty to do it. How can you knowingly sit back? The only people that benefit in that situation are lawyers, because it's going to be two sides fighting over what the legislative intention was. And then we'll be going and bringing in Hansard transcripts. And my head's exploding because I'm like, they're still here. Could we go ask them? So anyway, my point is that there's nothing unusual about this and undemocratic. And in fact, the only thing unusual about what Danielle Smith and her government has done is they've had the courage to act very quickly and very decisively when they saw that the legislative intention was not being achieved.
This government they're getting things done. Like, from the time it takes them to start talking about to the time it's done, they're not wasting any time. So, someone once said to me very recently, if you ever hear the government say they can't do it quickly, they can. They absolutely can. First, second, third reading, boom, done, royal assent, proclaim into law, problem solved. You mentioned about talking to the people that actually wrote the law or participated in drafting the bills or whatever. Interesting story. I met a guy who became my friend. His name is Brian Peckford. And I met him when I was fighting for my survival against the government. I found out that he was the last living signatory of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So I drove to Vancouver Island against the law. I wasn't allowed to travel out of my province at the time in a blizzard. And I met with Mr. Peckford, and I talked to him about these things. And he said, yeah, what they're doing to you, Chris, is not what the intention of Section 1 of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms was for. Never intended that. It's complete malarkey. He offered to be an expert witness testifying on my behalf. And you know what the court said? Actually, I think you were involved in something similar. The court said he didn't have standing as an expert witness because he wasn't an interpreter of the law. He only helped write it.
Well, and in that instance, there's a nuance here. The court's correct. And the reason is, and I forget the Latin expression off the top of my head, but it's the ultimate determination rule, but there's a Latin phrase for it. Sounds fancier. It's the notion is that only the judge in the courtroom can be the ultimate person who determines the facts, based on the evidence and the applicable law. So you can't bring in an expert on the law because that's the judge's job. And the difference also with the Peckford example, and you may know that I represented Premier Peckford in the fall of 2021 and
Right.
into 2022, suing on behalf of him, and 6 million unvaccinated Canadians had their mobility and other charter rights violated. So I was very honored to have that role, and he was critical advisor during the days when we were in Ottawa during the COVID protests and the mandates protests. So I have the utmost respect for him, but it's only the city. This is back to the principle of parliamentary supremacy, right? It's all the sitting legislature. That's why when you get a situation, for example, in Alberta, we had the Progressive Conservatives replaced by the Notley NDP. And the first thing they did was changed a whole bunch of laws, right, to reflect their values and their policies. And then the NDP were replaced by the Kenny Conservatives under Premier Kenny. And the first thing they did was undid a whole bunch of NDP laws, right? This is part of the whole idea of parliamentary supremacy, is that any sitting government is not bound by the previous government's actions. They have the keys to the lawmaking machine, and they can amend laws, they can make new laws, and they can repeal, and they can do things retroactively. So if Premier Peckford was still a premier as a signatory, it might be different, but you'd need all the signatories for him to be in the parallel role. But the bottom line is, what, in my view, what the, and someone's going to accuse me of being an apologist for Premier Smith. I'm calling it like I see it. And I was talking to someone today, and I said this. I said, there is a very significant level of increasing support in Saskatchewan for independence. We all know this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why is it that there's going to be an independence referendum in Alberta in 2026, and there's no indication at all that there'll be one in Saskatchewan? Both governments have the same powers. They have the same ability to make laws and amend laws. The difference is Danielle Smith and her government have been very clear at all times that they believe in grassroots initiatives, and that the democratic principle that if citizens come together on and they believe there's an important issue that they want the government to act on, if they follow procedures and that have some fairly significant hurdles to show it's not whimsical, then that's what we should have and the government should act. So it's a good day. And I think we're very fortunate to have the government that we have. There are many things that I disagree with the Premier on. I don't know if many things, there's a number of things. It's probably far, far more things we agree on than disagree on. There's some things that they've done that I'm not, maybe wish they hadn't have done. But you know what? There's things that my wife and I agree on and disagree on. I'm sure there's things that I've done that she maybe wished I hadn't, and vice versa. It's part of life. We can't expect perfection. And if that's our measuring stick, then we'll never be happy or successful. So I think today was a very good day. It took a lot of political courage for this government, for this cabinet, for this caucus to take the steps that they did. They knew they were going to get pushback. They knew that, I haven't talked to them about it. It's obvious that the NDP were going to try and exploit it. The comrades of the NDP, being all the unionists, are going to try and exploit it, and then all backed up by the paid media that gets their money from Ottawa. So it took courage to do what they've done.
Well, with the NDP's response to anything, I often wonder if Danielle Smith and the UCP cured cancer, the NDP would bash them for putting oncologists out of work and mobilize the unions against them. It seems like it doesn't matter how good what the government is doing for the people of Alberta, the NDP just don't want any of it. And it's almost, to me, it's almost like a bit of a joke watching them debate in the legislature, because you would think that, well, I guess that it's in the name, the official opposition, His Majesty's official opposition, right? So I guess they have to oppose everything. But yeah, it is pretty wild. Speaking of opposition, somewhere along the line, somebody started a campaign called Campaign Total Recall. And now we have 20 UCP MLAs, actually I think 2 NDP as well, maybe, who are facing a recall under the Recall Act. What's your take on that? It seems like it's a little bit of almost a waste of time to me.
Well, I mean, it'll be a test. It'll be a test of the organizational capability of the unions who are behind it and the NDP supporters. I don't think they'll be successful. I don't think they'll get the numbers that they need. And if they were to get the numbers, which I don't think they will, and obviously the government's not worried about it, else they would have amended the law, right? Then it triggers an election in that riding. So it doesn't mean the MLA's necessarily out. Doesn't mean that if it's a UCP seat, doesn't mean it automatically becomes an NDP seat. It's just one step in the journey. Just like with us, with what the Alberta Prosperity Project's doing, the citizen initiative is one step in the journey. You know, the next step after that is the referendum. And then the step after that is if it's successful, and I think it can be and will be, the negotiation with the federal government and the provinces and Washington, D.C.
That's something I like to point out at APP meetings. So there's a lot of people that have an idea that we have a referendum and boom, we become independent and we have to do all these things. Well, that's not exactly how it works. The Clarity Act, it specifically says a successful referendum results in negotiation between the other provinces, the province and the federal government and the other provinces, which may result in secession. That's the wording as far as I'm aware. So that means there's the negotiation period, and I don't know how long that could take. I do know that the speed of the courts and government isn't always the fastest. But then, like you say, after that, if the negotiations fail, then there's another part. There's a Declaration of Independence. And then there's another part. There's a constitutional convention. And then another part, electing a government. So it's a series of steps that have to be done in order. And it's not a quick thing. So a lot of the things that I think people are asking about can be start being dealt with at specific times along the way. Is that kind of what we're looking at?
Yeah, I think the negotiations, though, will go more quickly. They have the opportunity and the prospect of going very quickly because the Supreme Court of Canada, in the reference decision, paragraphs 154 and 155, envisions a scenario where the other parties, the federal government and some of the other provinces and First Nations, don't enter into good faith negotiations for the province to leave and become an independent country. And so the Supreme Court of Canada said in the 1998 reference decision in paragraph 155 that this does not preclude a unilateral international recognition of independence. So what am I talking about when I say unilateral international recognition of independence? Mark Carney, in what I believe was a spectacular demonstration of his lack of political acumen, announced a few months ago now that before the Israel Hamas ceasefire, that the government of Canada was unilaterally recognizing Palestine as an independent country.
I remember.
Right. So there's a precedent and an example, and other countries did it as well, the UK, France, and so on. So if negotiations aren't going well, in the sense that the other parties aren't entering into good faith negotiations, there's nothing to prevent other countries, particularly really important ones to us and important ones in the world, say, for example, our largest neighbor, the largest economy in the world, the United States. There's nothing to prevent. And in fact, the Supreme Court of Canada seemed to envision the prospect of it, that the United States could recognize unilaterally the independent Alberta as an independent country in the same way that the Carney government did so for Palestine. What's interesting about Palestine is it doesn't even have a defined border. We know where the borders of Alberta are.
Yeah, and if Canada follows its pattern from recent history, they really should be the first ones to acknowledge an independent Alberta, because at the core of Canadian democracy, they believe in democracy and they believe in the will of the people. They were the first. We were the first. I think we were the first or second sovereign nation to recognize Kosovo when they declared independence, and they did it unilaterally. So, along that pattern, they should just say, okay, well, if you guys want to be independent, then we recognize you as a democratic nation.
One of the other things I was thinking we should talk about, it came out today. There was some kind of news conference, and I've only read in a little bit on it, but I got the gist of it. I think it was the Treaty 8 First Nations and some others held some press conference and protesting the MOU between Alberta and Ottawa, and making some very inflammatory statements and threats that
Sorry, who was protesting it? I missed.
The chiefs of the Treaty 8 nations held a press conference today. And there was some news coverage of it, and you can see clips of their actual statements from the podium. And they were saying things like, you can't do this. By this, they're not just talking about a pipeline through BC. They're talking about a pipeline in Alberta. They're talking about expanding production of the oil sands and other resource projects and economic activities. And it's like, okay, come on, you guys. Could you please read the treaty? This is getting a little tiring.
Yeah.
It's a deal. And the deal was, and it's right on the front page, you've seen it, it's in clearest of language. Cede, forever, give up, surrender, right? The land. And it wasn't a taking, it was an exchange. You give up your rights to all of this territory, and you give it up to the king, the crown. And in return, we will give you all of these different things. You won't pay taxes. You will have reserves. You will have free education, free healthcare. You can hunt any animal at any time of the year, wherever you want. I could keep going, right? There was a quid pro quo. When I come to your cafe and I give you money, you give me a burger, right? There's an exchange. I can't say, no, this is my money, I'm taking it back, but I want your burger that you just made with your labor and your resources. So when it's treaty land, that means it's no longer the First Nations land. That's what the treaty was all about. Okay. So I don't know where this is all coming in, and no one calls them out on it. No reporter says, well, excuse me, so Chief so-and-so, you do realize that the treaty says on the first page, and they're not long, right? I think you've covered them in some of your shows, says that you forever gave up these lands and they're now crown lands. Why are you saying they're your lands, right? Like, help me understand how you square this circle. So the rhetoric we're getting from some of the First Nations is somewhat remarkable, because it doesn't align with the legal reality. It is absolutely true that, and it's not the case that when a government announces an intention to have the resources of the province developed to create wealth and jobs and prosperity and revenue for services and infrastructure, that means before any proponent can come forward, that there has to be a consultation with the First Nation. That's not what the law is, and it's never been that. The law says that when a specific project is proposed, so Keith and Chris we want to do a forestry project, north of Slave Lake, and it happens to be in the traditional territory of one of the First Nations, and it could affect their hunting and trapping and other traditional activities. We have a duty as the company that's proposing that forestry project to find out who we might be impacting, consult with them, and get their input on it. They don't have a veto. We just have to consult with them and find ways to mitigate impacts if there are going to be impacts, and know what those impacts are. And then it's the government's duty at law to make sure that Chris and Keith's logging company did that consultation and it was adequate. That's it. That's where it begins and ends. So this morphing that's occurred on almost hyperspeed in the last year with events in British Columbia, although they have some very different foundational facts and law than us, fortunately, in a negative way for them, is that the First Nations do not have a veto. When it comes to a veto on a referendum, they don't have a veto when it comes to independence, and they don't have a veto on natural resource projects. What they have is each member, each First Nations person in Alberta, as long as they're over 18 and they're a resident of Alberta, they're a voter in Alberta, just like you and me, they get one vote. They can sign the petition if they want. They don't have to. If it leads to a referendum, they get one vote. They can vote yes for independence, or they can vote no to stay in Canada. After that, after a successful referendum, as we've talked about, that's when the negotiations begin. And the First Nations are entitled to be at the table. And the First Nations, some of them may say, let's say the Treaty 8 guys say, nope, we want everything to remain the same. We go, no problem. Right now, your reserves are owned by the government of Canada.
Bingo.
The day after independence is finalized and implemented, they will continue to be owned by the government of Canada. No problem. All of your affairs and your lives are administered by bureaucrats in Ottawa and the Department of Indian Affairs, or whatever they keep changing their name to be, under the Indian Act. No problem. That'll carry on. And whatever duty proponents have in the new country of Alberta for resource projects that impact on you, there will be a duty for them to consult and mitigate their impact. And the the new government of Alberta will make sure it happens. In other words, you won't notice a difference, except your reserve will be surrounded by the government of the country of Alberta instead of the province of Alberta. That's one of their options. Zero change. Another option,
the least best option, I believe.
Well,
but it's not my choice.
Look at the houses the federal government's done. I mean, wow. What do you call that architecture on most reserves, right? Other than, unfortunately, tragic squalor. It's terrible what they have to live in. So it's just been a complete failure, the federal government's approach to First Nations. But if they want to carry that on, that's their choice. And if they think it's good enough or they can improve it with the federal government, that's their choice. That's not my choice, Chris. It's not yours. It's not even my business. It's theirs. Mm-hmm. So that's a very respectful approach, and that's the legal reality. The second option they'll have that's obvious is they can say, no, we want everything to remain the same. We just want the new government of Alberta, the country of Alberta, to step into the shoes of Ottawa. So that means the reserve lands will be owned by the government of Alberta. The equivalent of the Indian Act will be administered by Alberta, etc. Or what they might say is, like some First Nations have done in other parts of the country is say, you know what? Why don't we sit down and negotiate a new deal?
Yes.
These treaties were negotiated in the late 1800s. Let's sit down and negotiate a new 2026 or new 2027 treaty and modernize the whole thing and change the way our relationships are. But they get to decide. We can't tell them. And this is the whole thing. That's where I don't get this hair on fire reaction from the First Nations is they get one vote in the referendum, just like everybody else. If the referendum's successful, and I think it will be, then they get a seat at the table. And if they say, we don't want anything to change, we say, no problem. Super easy, done deal. And then from there, they can say, well, you know what? Actually, we might want some changes. How about this? And then we can say, sure. Or yeah, we'll agree to that, but you got to then agree to this. We have an honest negotiation like you would in any other mature setting.
We really need some changes. I mean, the statistics on First Nations in this country they're heartbreaking, to say the least. But it occurs to me that when these chiefs do the things they're doing right now, like say things like the answer will always be no. The answer is no, and it will always be no. Well, that's bad faith negotiation for starters. Second, those treaties also say that these lands, the traditional lands, can be used for hunting, fishing, trapping, resource gathering, those types of things to sustain their lives. But it also specifies that in case of a settlement or development, they're not to interfere. It specifically says that. And so when I hear chiefs saying, respect the treaties, these are our sacred treaties, I'm like, dude, you're literally ignoring parts of the treaties that you don't like and telling us to respect the other ones. And you mentioned, Keith, that they don't own the reserves. Why in the world would a group of people want to limit their existence to a piece of land that they don't own, that they'll never own, that they don't have any, they really don't have any, they've got custodial ownership over it. That's it. Why wouldn't they want to, if I was, my opinion, they say, okay, Alberta government, you're going to take over these reserves. I'd say, okay, well, they're yours now. This is your land. We'll give it to them. You know what? Why would you want to stay in that perpetual state? I mean, it's 2025. We don't put people on reserves. We put animals on reserves. We bring people into society with us. So the whole idea that we had to segregate a portion of our society onto specific chunks of land is absolutely ludicrous. And it's not like it was back in the day. Back in the day, they wanted to make sure they had a spot, they could stay and they could flourish and stuff like that. They were worried about being, pushed off land. And so maybe it was necessary, but it sure as heck isn't now. And I really hope that enough First Nations people come with us that we can fix these things.
Yeah, I agree. I hope the rhetoric gets turned down, and everybody has a fresh-eyed look at the situation, what's really being proposed, the legal reality and standing of the parties, and the options, the remarkable optimistic options available for the future in terms of relations and opportunities for Albertans and all of the members of the First Nations, and the benefits that they could derive from a reformed relationship. So that's one. The other thing I wanted to mention is Tomac Lukasic and his petition. It was remarkable because I've posted, and others have on Twitter and other social media, on X, his actual referendum application, the one he signed with the stamp on it, right?
Yeah.
And he submitted an application for a petition for a referendum on Alberta staying in Canada.
Yeah.
And then after he launched his campaign, he switched his messaging and he started saying, I think a referendum is a really bad idea. There should be no referendum vote in Alberta about staying or leaving from Canada. So sign my petition to stop a referendum from occurring.
That's
so
a
people
lie.
thought, well, it's not accurate. That's for sure. I don't want to imply what his mental intentions were, but it's not accurate. And so many people signed that thinking they were signing to prevent any referendum from occurring. And so remarkably what he did, and that's why so many of us, when he announced he had the signatures, we were like, well, thanks, Thomas.
Mm-hmm.
You've just compelled the Alberta government to hold a referendum on whether Alberta should stay or leave Canada. And if the question is framed, should Alberta stay in Canada? Well, the no is it should leave. It should be independent. Yes. So it's the corollary. And the other thing that I want to clarify is it's weird, a weird nuance here. When you file your application, like Lukasic did, and APP did again today, you put what you think the question of the referendum will be. Okay. And that's and it's very carefully drafted. There was a number of us lawyers that worked on the wording to make it as legally tight as possible for the APP question. So we're going to get the signatures. Then it's going to be validated. I mean, we all got to work hard to make sure we get the signatures, but I'm confident that will happen. And then it goes, once it's validated by Elections Alberta, by the Chief Electoral Officer, it then goes to the Alberta government. And then they apply the Referendum Act, the Alberta Referendum Act, and the Federal Clarity Act, which is a byproduct of the 1998 Supreme Court of Canada decision on succession. And the Alberta government then says, okay, this was the question that was put out for the petition. The Alberta government then rewrites the question, even for Lukaszuk. They decide what the referendum specific wording will be. And they have some obligation to make sure it's legally Clarity Act compliant. So the actual question that goes on the referendum ballot in the fall of next year, when I expect the referendum to occur in October of 2026, it might be slightly different than the question that APP put out. And that's how the process works. That's normal, okay? And proper and makes sense, because they have to adjust it to make sure it's constitutionally compliant in their view. So those are some of the things that might come. But, I've tried to find clips where Lukaszuk talks about why Alberta should stay in Canada and why my kids will have a better, more prosperous, best life by staying in Canada versus being in an independent Alberta. And I really keep coming up dry on that. So I don't know if you noticed. I thought, hey, I'm going to keep an open mind. If someone can convince me that my kids will actually have a better future in staying in Canada, then I want to know that. I want to know that before I vote in the referendum. So I made a public call out to Lukaszuk and I said, let's have a professional, respectful debate. You can lay out all the reasons why you think we'd be better off staying in Canada, and I'll lay out the reasons why I think my kids will have a better future in an independent Alberta. And let's go on Ryan Jesperson's show live. Ryan is, some will say he's center of politically, others will say he's to the left. Either or gives me no advantage, right? He's going to ask hard questions. And let's let the people observe who has the better arguments. And so I put that out. Rise of Alberta made up one of those funny caricature UFC fight posters, which I thought was quite funny.
I'm looking for it right now. I can't find it.
Yeah, it's funny too, because I don't think Lukaszuk's that big, but it doesn't matter. It makes him look tougher. I think they got his hair right though, because his hair's always been important to him. That's why he has the nickname Fabio. So anyway, there it is. Yeah, he's definitely not that big, but it's okay. Makes it look like a fair fight. So then a few hours later, Ryan Jesperson with his Real Talk program podcast jumped in and said, I'm in. So we're now waiting to hear from Thomas Lukaszuk as to whether he would like to go on to a live podcast in a friendly, safe environment moderated by Ryan Jesperson, so he can explain to all of us why it's better for us to stay in Canada, and I can point out the reasons why I think it's better for us to be independent.
And Ryan's good. He's had Naheed Nenshi on his podcast. He's had Mark Carney on there. Like he's pretty tries to be fairly neutral and listen to everybody. But on the topic of Mark Carney, I think Lukaszuk is meeting with Mark Carney to get his wrist slapped for getting the referendum on the table or something. It seems
no, it's better than that. It's better than that. He is meeting, based on the reports that I've read, this is his second tour to Ottawa this week. He was there last week as well, is to help provide insight to senior Ottawa officials and politicians and senators and MPs and cabinet ministers on what's going on in Alberta. And
interesting choice to talk about that.
What's that?
It's an interesting choice of a person for them to summon to ask those questions.
Well, it's certainly helpful for us in the independence movement.
Yeah.
So yeah. I'll just leave it at that. I don't want to be impolite. It's just beneficial for us that he's the guy there. relying on to provide some wisdom and guidance. So,
yeah, well, things are certainly about to get interesting. The Alberta Prosperity Project is likely going to start their petition drive, petition campaign, kind of around the mid-January. We're going to rocket to our 177,000 signatures. We're going to surpass it. I think we're ramping up to, I think Mitch Sylvestre said he wants to do 3 Alberta Prosperity Project events per day, like 3 events, one in each area of the province with our list of speakers, and just educate, because that's what the Alberta Prosperity Project is. We're an educational society, and our goal is to educate Albertans as to the merits and benefits of Alberta independence. And on that, because of that, I would be more than happy to help facilitate a debate between you and Thomas Lukaszuk. I mean, that is absolutely fantastic. And in a country or a democracy in which speaking, like it's literally the House of Parliament, like the house to speak in, why would he not want to speak to you? Why would he not want to have the conversation? We have to have these conversations because there's going to be a referendum. And if he wants to really pitch his side and his view, then he better start backing it up with some winning some debates. But at this point,
well, there's only one logical explanation as to why he doesn't want to debate me. And the answer is because he wants to keep all the good reasons to stay in Canada secret.
Yes, of course.
I'm joking, obviously. But on the petition signing, I can't emphasize this enough. If normally you're doing a petition drive for cancer or trying to get support for a new skating rink in your community or something, anybody can print off the petition form and anybody can make up a form. That's not the case with this stuff. It has to be an official form. And not only that, we have a new phenomena now. This is 2025, and we're going to be going into 2026. And a lot of people in the younger generation never have really learned how to print or write. Have you seen how a 20-year-old or a 25-year-old writes? Most of them?
Yeah.
It's incomprehensible.
So if you want to keep secrets, write in cursive.
What's that?
If you want to keep secrets, write in cursive.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They don't even know what it is. So we're going to need to make sure we do things like have somebody on the canvassing team that has really good penmanship. And when you want to sign, they just say, no, it's okay, Chris. Just give me your driver's license. I will fill your name, your address, the information in, and then hand the pen to you to sign rather than handing you the clipboard. Because if there's one letter in there that the reviewers at the Chief Elections Alberta can't read, that vote's disqualified.
Yeah.
That signature
that happened with Thomas's petition. There's 465,000 signatures collected and only 405,000 made it past the vetting process.
Right. So those are types of some of the disciplines we're going to need to put in process. And there's a verification process that needs to occur to ensure that the person's a proper legally valid signer, that they are qualify as a voter of Alberta, over 18, residency, things like that. So we're going to have to use meticulous care in the filling out of these petition sheets so that as many of the signatures we get are actually validated in the end. And we're not cavalier about it and get overexcited and rush to get as many numbers without getting the numbers correctly.
Yeah, and on that topic, throughout this whole campaign, we have to be very diligent. When we share information, we got to make sure we know what we're talking about. You can find a ton of information on the Alberta Prosperity Project website. Keith, I think you've been doing a podcast on these subjects. You've done a few now, talking about different parts of Alberta independence or how we get there. I've been writing. I blog from time to time. You can find that on my website, folks. You know where that is. But the key is arm yourself with I shouldn't say that. whatever, arm yourself with the knowledge you need to have these conversations so that you can equip. That's a better word. That's going to get clipped into a TikTok for sure. Equip yourself with the information you need to have these conversations. And also be diligent in how you're talking to people. I have a very tough time, a lot of the time, being patient and gracious to people who have opposing views to me. I find myself having to check my emotions frequently, lest I, have a little bit of an outburst and use a name that they wouldn't use in court or something like that. But we got to be really careful. And this is a very, very serious and probably the most important thing we're going to do, likely in our lifetimes. I mean, aside from our family things, having children, teaching them those things, this is the most important thing. We've got to put some effort in.
One of the messages people are going to start to see promoted on social media in the coming days and leading up to Christmas is that one of the things that's unique about the Christmas holidays is that we get forced out of our echo chambers and our bubbles. We have to go to Uncle Bob's place.
Yes.
Right? Mm-hmm. And Uncle Bob's the unionist.
Yeah.
And he loves Carney, whatever. You know what I'm saying? So this is a great opportunity for those who have already decided with clarity in their mind that Alberta is far better off independent, that we can free ourselves from these ideological extremists in Ottawa that are holding us back and indebting our children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren with their reckless debts and spending and two-tier justice system and all of these other things, out of control immigration that we can see are spiraling the country into a dark place. It creates an opportunity to learn and listen to what those people outside our bubbles and our echo chambers think, and also to have some awkward conversations. There was one meme I saw, and it was a picture, it's always from the US, and it was a caricature of, large families together at a big Thanksgiving table. And at the head of the table, standing facing you, is this confident silver-haired lady. And it said something like, "Be that aunt at Thanksgiving," like that it'd be like the kids going, "Oh no, here comes Aunt. She's going to talk about Alberta independence again." Be that aunt, right? Try and get people's minds open. Use it as an opportunity to cross over, because as we know, Chris, we joke about the third. There's the third who are going to vote for independence, even if you kidnap their dog. There's the third that will never vote for independence, even if you gave them a brand new electric vehicle and $100,000 cash. And then there's the middle third that are unengaged, just living their lives. And they need to understand that if they vote for independence, when they look at their paycheck, their stub, their electronic notification of their deposit, and they look at how much money they worked for and how much money they got, tell them you get to keep it all, because Alberta will be positioned like other countries in the world that have less resources than us, Saudi Arabia and others, to provide that level of benefit to our people. So focus on getting this is all going to be won or lost by that middle third. Getting the people who are already committed to say, yeah, let's go. That's okay. That's not bad, but that does not get us over the finish line. No way. We got to get the middle third that aren't engaged, that haven't decided, and aren't even thinking about this stuff, to understand the tremendous benefits that will accrue to them, their children, their community, their neighbors, their friends, through an independent Alberta.
Yeah, and those things are very exciting to me. I've had jobs where I made lawyer money, Keith, and I've had jobs where I hardly made any money. Then I bought a restaurant, so you can imagine what that's like. So the prospect of the financial gain or financial freeing is really what it is super exciting. But what excites me the most about an independent Alberta in which we can chart our own course forward is not feeling defeated even before I cast my vote. That's the major problem I have right now, is that as an Albertan, as a Western Canadian, I have no confidence that my input in any federal election will make any significant difference to my future or my children's. And that's my main
And
thing.
I would say it a little bit differently, not to invalidate anything you just said. What drives me crazy is I see these ridiculous policies, ridiculous laws, ridiculous spending announcements, the corruption that is manifest in Ottawa. And I know there's nothing I can do about it.
Exactly.
It won't matter who I vote for.
Exactly.
I remember I was interviewed a couple of times well, after the federal election. Carney became prime minister, and was on, I think, Rebel News, and they said, well, Pierre Poilievre is going to, eat him up in question period. And I said, so?
And then what?
Yeah. And then what? Exactly. And not only that, I said, he's not going to show up. He's going to take trips. He's going to go to Europe. Like, it is exactly what he does. He pretends to be too important to be in question period. But it doesn't make a difference. And then, no offense to Poilievre, I think he's a phenomenal human being and an incredible politician. Then when he had his by-election in Alberta, there was all this excitement that it was going to change something. And I'm like, what's it going to change? Yeah. There's no power. And there's no power because I think Canada's too big. I do not think it's the proper organizational structure for optimal performance of any province. It's too big. And it's too culturally diverse. There's cultural diversity in Alberta, from Grand Prairie to Lloydminster to Lethbridge to Pincher Creek to back up to Calgary to Red Deer. There's huge cultural variability here.
We're the size of 5 European countries.
Yes, or more, depending on which countries you pick. That's picking the bigger ones for sure. So, I just think the model and the experiment is a failure. And unfortunately, we're on the receiving end of it, of the worst of it, because we're the generators of wealth. We're the ones with the extreme work ethic. We're the ones that want to get up in the morning and go to work, not get up in the morning and say, well, what's the government going to give me and do for me today? Like, unfortunately, so many other people in central Canada and eastern Canada and Quebec. And then they can get away with that because we send all the money to help them live and have these crazy programs. So I'm incredibly optimistic about the opportunity of what the world will look like in the future for our kids and for us in an independent Alberta. We will have the power to make the decisions, the policies, the laws. We can say no to two-tier justice. We can say, I've got some family members that have been looking to immigrate to other countries. It is spectacular, the requirements that most countries put on immigrating, the amount of money you have to bring with you. It's insane. They don't just say, come on in and we'll give you all this stuff. It's beyond comprehension what we're doing. And no wonder we're having troubles. So we can have control over that. And all of the other things that we see are nutty, like confiscating our guns. It's like, we all know what that precedes. Ones causing the gun crime.
Yeah. There's some a lot of the things that I want to be done. Alberta could actually do it right now, and it's been talked about for years. Even Stephen Harper with his firewall letter, he talked about a few things that we should do. And it is interesting to see now that finally the Smith government is actually taking some steps to maybe implement some of them and at least looking at them. But I mean, these are things that should have been done 50 years ago, 60 years ago, and we're just looking at it right now. It's absolutely wild. I'm just going through the questions. I know there's a lot of comments, like tons of comments, very supportive. There's the odd unsupportive comment, but that's great. I wanted to mention when you were talking about this, I do like it when people put challenges or opposing views in the comments. Those are my inspiration to come up with a new reason why Alberta needs to be independent. I still haven't had one opposing or one contradictory view on Alberta independence that I haven't been able to turn into a reason why we need to be independent. You know, the landlocked thing is a good example. Oh, well, we're going to be landlocked. Sorry, but we're landlocked right now, and we can't negotiate our policy, but we could as an independent nation. So please, folks, if you have any concerns, questions, put them in the comments. I might not get to them right now. Keith and I might not get to them, but I go through them and I research those things, and I use that for my next talk that I do at an Alberta Prosperity Project event, or sometimes I blog about it. So I really do appreciate that. And I'm just going through the comments right now to see if there's any specific questions. And then I guess we'll wrap up, Keith, because we're about an hour in right now. And I know you got other stuff to do that keeps the lights on. So I want to be respectful of your time. There's a pile of comments, though. And it's mostly
I just turned them on so I could see them. Normally I make sure they're turned off so I don't get distracted by them. So good on you for keeping them on. There was something I was going to say, see if it'll come back. See, it already proves why I keep comments turned off on my side of the screen. So yes, there's going to be people sabotaging us. It's already started. It's only going to get worse. They're not going to want to see the change. I know what I was going to say. The thing that appeals to me about independence is, first of all, many things, but one is there's actually not that many things we have to change to do it. What do I mean by that? There's not a lot of things that the federal government actually does.
Yeah.
When you look at they don't look after roads and highways. Even the Trans-Canada Highway, Highway 1, is a provincial highway. It's just designated the Trans-Canada Highway, so it gets a little bit of funding from the federal government. But it's provincial laws that apply to it. It's provincial contracted snow plows and paving crews and line marking guys. It's provincial tow trucks that drive on it. I could go through the list. So, we'd have to run a passport office. Well, the federal government's kind of set a pretty low bar there to run a passport office. I'm pretty sure we could run a passport office better than the federal government does, because it's just a gong show, right? Just pathetic bureaucracy out of control. So there's just, the land in Alberta, if it's not private land, it's owned by the province of Alberta. Crown land in Alberta means provincial crown. The mines and minerals are owned by the provincial crown. The water's owned by the provincial crown. Most of the jails are owned by the provincial government and run by the provincial government. There is a few federal penitentiaries, but only a few, and we can negotiate taking those over in the negotiations. There's the Canadian, we'd have to create an army. Well, look at the mess the Canadian Army is. It's a shell of itself.
Yeah.
It's not even functioning army.
It's a disaster.
It's a disaster. So it's not like we're going to be without an army, because we really don't have one now. And we'll be able to build it up with some competence without all this DEI and tampon nonsense. The court buildings are all owned by and built by the provincial government and paid for by the provincial government. The lowest level of court they're appointed and paid for by the provincial government. The higher levels are appointed by the federal government and paid for. So that would be something we would take over, but we're not going to be sending 30, 40, $50 billion a year to Ottawa and have all these restrictions on our economy. Do we even need a post office anymore? Maybe we do. Couriers seem
Amazon
to be doing
does a pretty good job of deliveries these days.
They seem to be making Canada Post look pretty pathetic. That's for sure. Yeah. So really, at the end of the day, the level of functions that the Alberta government would need to take on and expand to include are not that great. And it's not like we're going to go, oh my God, how do we do this? Right? A lot of the people who work in the federal government who administer these types of services to Albertans are in the government building in your regional center or working at the Jasper Avenue big Canada Place building. Yeah. And we could negotiate the acquisition of that building. And if we need people to run our passport office, initially we could offer all them jobs in the Alberta passport office, right?
Because they already know what they're doing, mostly.
Yeah. I mean, you're just going to change, instead of getting a paycheck from the federal government, they're going to get a paycheck from the Alberta government. Same with the police, if we still have the RCMP at that point. And we know we're already transitioning away from that anyway, because as Premier Smith has pointed out at the next panels, the federal government's already announced they want to get the RCMP out of community policing.
Yep.
So we got to replace them anyway.
It's a good thing we've been preparing for that.
Yeah. So there's, it'd actually require very remarkably little. I mean, it's serious work and it's important work, and there will be challenges, but it's not really that daunting because the federal government does play such a limited role. How many hospital beds does the federal government administer? Zero. How many hospitals in Alberta are federal government hospitals? Zero. How many universities are federal government universities? None. How many school buildings? None. Right? So it is surprising to me the number of people who aren't involved and pay attention to politics. They have no clue. You could literally go on the street and say, is the University of Alberta a federal government institution or in Alberta? And they would have no idea.
A lot of people don't even know the difference between the federal and the provincial government. I thought for the first 35 years of my life that the federal government was like supreme above everything else, and we had to listen to them. It was only in the last 5 years that I even learned what a CA is, and that's pretty pathetic. I'm hoping in an independent Alberta that we have civics as mandatory education through K to 12. I'm going to rapid fire some questions, Keith, because there are a few popped up after we mentioned questions. Kerry asks, who would be delegated for negotiations, Chris, if we are successful? My opinion, I know some really good litigation lawyers, and I think that they would do a fantastic job negotiating. Keith?
I've done lots of negotiating.
You're pretty good at it too.
Yeah, my clients tell me that.
Yeah. So is that kind of the idea that we would have a delegation of people with intimate knowledge of the workings of Alberta, send them to Ottawa and negotiate on our behalf?
Well, the first thing I would do is I would require them to come to me.
There you go. Yeah. Oh, good call. Yeah. Yeah, the airplanes go both ways, don't they?
We look like we're not rookies. Yeah.
Good call. Beautiful. Okay. Where was it here? Mahmood had a question, and his question was, there are a number of minority communities who consider Alberta home. What is your message for them? As I know many of them feel threatened by the separatist movement promoted by the left and the NDP.
They're Albertans. Albertan was initially, the First Peoples were here from a number of different First Nations. And then we entered our settlement phase, and Alberta was built by immigrants from all parts of primarily Europe, but other parts of the world. And it continues to be built by immigrants. And we're all call Alberta home, and they will become, if you're, so who's an Alberta voter? Who can vote in the referendum? And it's a Canadian citizen who is ordinary resident in Alberta and who is over 18 years of age. So all of those people will become citizens of Alberta, and we will have an immigration policy where if somebody's here already, that they can transition to citizenship, and we will have a sensible immigration policy like Canada once had, where we can grow our population, because we will need to, because of the economic activity that's going to be occurring. But we'll do it in a sensible, intelligent way, unlike the reckless wide openness that's occurred, that's to the detriment of everyone, whether it's to the policies of the federal government in throwing immigration wide open has been harmful not only to the Albertans who were already here, but it's been unhelpful to the immigrants as well, because they're not able to get the services and the quality of services that we once were able to receive.
I just want to point out that the idea of referring to someone as a minority, it's become strange to me. Like, I'm a minority in that nobody really looks like me. Well, I mean, if they're lucky, they don't look like me. There's very few people that look like me. So I'm a minority. You know what I say to folks that ask this question is, what's a more disturbing prospect? Not doing anything, continuing on this path, and basically letting the country decline to a state where we don't even recognize it anymore. These folks, they came here to work hard, to succeed, to prosper, and to raise their families. That's why the majority of them came here, and they're looking at the same things we are. So I would say, if you spent all that time and money to come here and do this, to be part of this society, you kind of have an obligation to defend it as well. And that's what we're doing. We're defending against the managed decline of a country that just doesn't want to be that country anymore. That's how I would. It's not that we're trying to alienate these folks. We're trying to make sure they have what they came for well into the future, and they're not going to if we don't do anything.
Success and prosperity and a happy life for them and their children and their grandchildren.
Yes, exactly.
That's the goal.
That's the goal. What about the Commonwealth? Would we cut ties?
Well, that's to be decided. In my view, I mean, what are our ties? What are our ties to the Commonwealth? I mean, what are they? Do we have to fight in their wars? Is that a thing? No, there was a time where it really meant a lot, but that time's long since passed. So are we going to, particularly as the rest of the world has modernized as well, and Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union collapsed, right? Are we going to have, Canada has individual, if you go through South America and Central America, each country has a different policy on immigration, visas, visitor rights, for example, and how long you can stay, all these sorts of things. Those things are all those are ordinary course decisions that countries make routinely, are easy to manage and easy to understand. So it's not like the old days where we needed to be part of the Commonwealth. So we had another country to go to and we can say, well, we're part of the Commonwealth, and wear some fancy collared thing and talk with an accent. We're not in that world anymore. So we'll have trade relationships. We'll have the ability to negotiate bolder trade arrangements. Because, for example, we won't be being held hostage by the supply management dairy cartel out of Quebec, right? We'll be more nimble because we'll have more focused considerations and less constraints. So I don't know that we need to be part of the Commonwealth. I don't think it actually brings right now tremendous advantage. If there is some tremendous advantage that I'm not thinking of, it's something that could be considered, that we could negotiate with other Commonwealth countries and say, Barbados is a Commonwealth country. I've been there once. It wasn't that much different than me going to, the U.S. Virgin Islands or the French whatever island when I went to one of them once on a cruise ship.
Polynesia.
Yeah, it's just... or their ability to go to Australia versus our ability to go to Great Britain or to France. So I think it's a detail that's likely inconsequential compared to the more meaty things that we will, and substantive things that we'll resolve.
But the important thing to note, and you mentioned it, is that as a sovereign, independent nation, we can negotiate our own trade deals, our own alliances, economic unions if we choose to, those types of things. Things that we can't do right now. I'm gonna do 2 more questions, folks, and then we're gonna wrap it up and let Keith get on with his day. Another one from Tina. She says, do they have to reside in Alberta for a certain amount of time? I sure hope so. This goes to the definition of ordinary, an ordinary resident.
And that's the test right now. And I'll research it to see how it's been given precision. But, I remember when I was at Osgoode Hall Law School for my first year of law school in Ontario. And, if somebody said, well, where's your, what province do you reside in? I would have said Alberta, right? I was just there for law school. So that meant I could not vote in an election, in municipal election there or a provincial election. But I could vote, even though I was going to law school at Osgoode in Toronto, I could still vote in an election in Alberta if one were to occur. So the test right now for voting is, where's your ordinary residence? And it doesn't necessarily mean where you're physically situated. There's some tests that are applied to I remember I had to vote to prove my ordinary residence. I had to bring like a telephone bill. This is before cell phones. And I had to bring a couple of other things that had my address on it. And then that satisfied them that I was an ordinary resident in that riding and I could vote. So it'll be a similar concept.
I had to do that to get my my Ralph bucks back in the day. Yeah.
Right.
And
Ralph,
we look at insurance companies and that. I think they say 6 months. 6 months if you're out of the province and you're in another province, then you got to switch your insurance and those things. So I think we already have some places to start, maybe just some details to iron out. And the last comment is not a question, it's a comment, but I love it. We need to also have a refugee program for Conservatives who are trapped in other provinces. Yeah, yeah, for sure. That is a thing. That's a thing. Well, that was great, Keith. I think we dealt with Bill 14, which has reduced some roadblocks to getting our signatures and getting that much closer to a referendum, which gets us that much closer to an independent Alberta. We've highlighted the fact that we have a lot of work to do. We have to make sure that we educate people on the merits and benefits of Alberta independence. And we have to be diligent in doing these things so that we have a successful referendum. I really do believe that this is the most important thing that we're going to do, aside from family things, in our lifetimes. I'm 46 years old. I think I've at least got another, 80 or 90 good years ahead of me. And I can't see anything as monumental as this happening in that time.
Thanks for having me on, Chris. I hope I was able to clarify a few points on the legal side and next steps. And keep on doing what you're doing. And everybody who's listening and watching, either now or on a replay, please reach out to your friends, people you meet, have those awkward discussions over Christmas and the holidays, to help others understand the importance of the opportunity that's in front of us and the dangers that lie ahead if we continue to ride this dystopian Canada that we're in today.
Yeah. I'm going to leave you with this, Keith. I've never told you this before. I met you in Ottawa during the convoy. We spent a little bit of time together, in passing. I watched you defending my friends in court since then. And I saw you speak about Alberta independence. The first time I saw it, watching you talk about it actually gave me hope that someone like you who is doing the work you're doing is on board with this. That was very, very motivating for me. So I just want to say thank you for getting on board the Alberta independence movement.
Those are very kind words. Thank you very much.
Well, there's more where that came from. You'll have to come back again. All right. Thank you very much, Keith. Have a great night, and I'm sure we'll talk, or I'll see you soon.
Excellent. Good night, everyone.
Night. Well, there you go. Keith Wilson, always amazing things to say. I love bringing guys like Keith on. We've had other amazing legal scholars, Jeff Rath, Leighton Gray, we've had on. We've had doctors and surgeons and stuff on the show talking about things. People with brains much larger than mine. It's very humbling that these guys take the time to come and have these conversations with me. It helps me, and I hope it helps you. And I'm going to continue doing it. Hopefully, we can get Mitch on sooner rather than later. If you have his phone number, text him, tell him to get on the show, send him an email. Well, don't bother him too much. He's busy. He's been away from home, I think, for 5 or 6 days. He's been on the road. The guy is an absolute machine, putting tens of thousands of kilometers on his truck every month, traveling to events, speaking about Alberta independence. If you haven't yet attended an Alberta Prosperity Project event where we're speaking about Alberta independence, please do so. You have to go there and ask your questions. If you have attended an event, come back again. Come to all of them. Bring friends. If you've been to a couple APP meetings, the next one that you see in your area, find 2 people that are on the fence and bring them. Tell them that we will 100% answer their questions. If I can't answer the question that I'm presented at the time, I will find the answer and I'll make sure I do a podcast or a video or a TikTok or something talking about it. We have a very, very great team of people who are educating Albertans about Alberta independence. And if you folks support that and you support that mission, we are going to win. And the world is going to change in a very, very drastic way and in a very, very positive way. But we can only do this together. So we need your support. Thank you very much for watching. Have a great night. And hopefully I will see you at the next Alberta Prosperity Project event. And if you don't know where to find it, you can go to www.albertaprosperityproject.com, which is also right there on that QR code. How do I point? Right there somewhere. You can scan that with your phone. That takes you to the website. Go to the events page and find out what's going on. Bring your friends. While you're at it, go to the resources page and just start reading. Get to know it. Get intimate with Alberta and Alberta independence so that when you have these conversations, you can be effective and bring people to the side of freedom and prosperity, because that's where we should be. Night, everyone.
Meow.
Alberta independence. That's where it's at.